I am here with you today to talk about the book and the TV show Pachinko. Holy guacamole! So the book came first. It's Pachinko by Min Lee, and I buddy read it right before the TV show came out. I've only seen the first 3 episodes of the TV show, so I cannot speak to the series as a whole, and maybe the ending's poop. I don't know that. Future Kelly will. But today we're going to talk about the book and the first 3 episodes. I have had this book on my list for a while, ever since I'm working at the bookstore, because it has won a lot of rewards and has always been talked about fondly by people who've read it, but it's a thick book. And I'm kind of scared of thick books. I don't know why or how, because I've read like Game of Thrones, Name of the Wind, like all these big fantasy books. So I've read them and enjoyed them. But I think especially with the headspace I've been in recently, I just didn't know if I had the commitment for a big book. And this is not just a big book. It is a chunky historical fiction. And I didn't realize I was so biased against big historical fiction until I started reading Pachinko. And almost every chapter I'm like, it's still good! Who knew? Oh my god, it is still so good. And it doesn't at all feel like the length that it actually is. I think it's around 500, 600 pages, depending on the edition you get. I blew through it. And I also realized, I think, for the future, that I'm going to read more big books, but on ebook. Because then my poor, sad little wrists don't get injured trying to hold up these books for hours. You just have it on your phone and it's all the same weight. So, it only took me 5 million years to think of that, but it's gonna be a game changer. Anyhoozle. So, for those who don't know, Pachinko is a generational saga starting with the daughter of this innkeeper in Korea and the story of her life and then her children's and grandchildren's life as they end up going from Korea to Japan during the time period of World War II, the Japanese occupation of Korea, the war in Korea, all the way up to, I think it cuts off in like the 1990s. And so you get this wide berth of time and history and a wide variety of characters, and they're all so well done. And in just a little bit of time, you feel like you really know them and what they're thinking and what their struggles are. And it's a third person narrative, but you hop in and out of these characters' heads so effortlessly, and the language changes just a bit to reflect that different mindset, the words they would use, the things that they would look at and consider. It was just expert craftsmanship. Just loved it. And the fun thing too about reading on ebook was that I was able to then like click on different things and look up the definitions at times for different words. Or one of the funnest little tidbits is that later on it references this wrestler, and I thought it was just a made-up wrestler, but when I clicked on it, it's actually a real like Korean wrestler that became famous in Japan and like had his own struggles, and it really interrelated so well and actually told even more about the character for him liking this particular wrestler. And so it was just like mind-blowing. Oh, so much research, so much detail, but it never felt like she was just like throwing research at you. It was all relevant and interspersed with the story and the plot. And unlike a lot of historical fiction, for me personally, a lot of that genre goes into either like boring, mundane, like it really just drags, especially in the middle, or it's always like raising the stakes to an insane degree and it becomes melodramatic and just really stressful. And this book didn't do either. It was so interesting without having to like give it a shot of adrenaline every 5 minutes. It was so well done. Like there was problems, there was action, there was forward momentum, but it never felt forced or arbitrarily heightened for the sake of dramatic effect. So good. Such a good book. Highly recommend. So one of the things I think that this author did really well was zooming in and zooming out of this larger narrative, right? So you have these characters, but you also have the world around it and all these turbulent things going on at the same time. So you have like November 1932, and it starts with Chapter 2, the winter following Japan's invasion of Manchuria was a difficult one. Biting winds sheared through the small boarding house, and the women stuff cotton in between the fabric layers of their garments. And so you have the large and the small, the macro and the micro, which I really love. And then she also has a lot of these great themes going on as well, as far as like this idea of colonization. And it's like you have these different experiences with these different generations of people, where it's like you have people that remember what it was like when Korea was its own sovereign nation. You have people that have grown up always knowing that Korea was colonized and don't know anything else. And so she goes back and forth with those perspectives. And then you have this idea, this like greater interplay between the nation and the citizen, and how, you know, like you have this greater global turbulence going on, but at the same time you have like this Monday, like day-to-day struggles. You also have the interesting juxtaposition when the family ends up moving to Japan, like what makes someone Korean, what makes someone Japanese, and this interplay of globalization with the Western world. And so you have this idea where this one Korean character is kind of thinking to themselves like how they assimilate into Japan, and part of their assimilation is wearing like a Western shirt. And so it's like the way to seem more Japanese is by wearing more Western. And so that interplay I thought was just so thought-provoking. This inner conflict of the Koreans in Japan and hearing what was happening back in their home country, as well as the fact that like with World War II, the inner conflict of like, do you want your colonizers, the Japanese people, to win? Well, no, but at the same time you're in Japan. Like the things that happen to the Japanese are probably going to happen to you as well. Like whoever wins isn't necessarily going to take the time to decide if everyone on those islands is guilty or not guilty. Even like the smallest roles, the smallest character, she'll just give like a sentence or a line to, and it'll give you such like an interesting glimpse into their world and their reality and their future. Oh, sorry, I can talk about this forever. It was a 5-star book. I really loved it. So now I will compare and contrast that to the TV show. I'm loving the TV show, which is, you know, I would like to say that happens every time something gets adapted into movie or TV, but it's so rare. It's so rare, especially if I really like the source material. Oftentimes I will have a lot of qualms about its adaptation, and it's not because I'm a purist. Like, I'm not one of those people where it's like, they changed the color of his shirt. No. I don't care. Or like they made like a small change or even a big change. Like if it makes sense and I can see where they're coming from and it enhances the story, or is necessary for the story being changed into a visual medium, I'm all about it. I'm all about it. And so far, the show has done a good job of that. So there have been changes made, but the cinematography is great. The script writing is great. And I think also it lends itself really well to being made into a TV show because there's so much meat and material to the story that it's not like a copy-paste situation. Like there's so much more to dig into and give us a little bit more scenes around certain characters. So many visual elements I think would be really cool to see, that it really lends itself to an adaptation. And so it's really interesting because the book takes a chronologically linear approach, right? So it starts when she's a young girl in Korea, and then it just works its way up from there to their version of modern day. The TV show decided to take the angle of cutting back and forth between her time as a young girl and her grandson in modern day. And I don't mind that change. I think it's a really interesting change, and you get a lot of interesting scene juxtaposition and new points or thread lines that are connected with that. So I think that's a really interesting choice that's been working out pretty well. The other thing is, that intro, that theme song, I'm loving it. It's so good. It got stuck in my head the other day. Love it. Love it. And the camera work, you guys, it's so good. Like, I'm not a like cineophile, cineo snob, but chef's kiss. So good. I could just like have this in the background with the sound off and just looking at that cinematography. So the other element that I think is really interesting is that they've cut out a few characters, which makes sense. It's a huge cast of characters, and I think they're only doing 8 to 10 episodes, so totally understandable. There's one guy that I'm kind of mad that they cut out because there's some really interesting plot and themes related to it. So that's going to be interesting. But it's fine. It's fine. You know, I get it. The second thing is, and I'm gonna be a little vague to avoid being too spoilery, but they're changing kind of a big plot point to like the grandson's narrative and how things kind of progress as far as this real estate deal that he's trying to do. And I'm curious how they're going to pull this off, because that change is going to have a domino effect of changing a bunch of other things. And I'm curious. Because they might be changing the ending pretty dramatically based off of this change that they've just initiated in episode 3, I think it was. And so I'm interested, but they have me on board. They've built up my trust at this point because they've done such a good job with everything else that I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt and be like, okay. The other thing too, to their benefit, is that the novel has a very literary ending. And what that means is it wasn't a visually exciting ending. So if they decide to go for a different ending, that's fine. That's fine. As long as it feels true to the story and it's a good ending, doing a different ending is, I think, fine. Because like with these characters, with these themes, with this narrative, there's so many different ways they could end it and have it feel authentic and true. And there wasn't anything about the book ending, though I liked it, that I'm like, oh man, I really gotta see that on the big screen. I gotta see a visual of that. Because if you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a very much a super cash like book ending. It's not a normal movie or TV ending, and that's fine. That's fine. Why? Because it's a book. And you know, a TV show is going to TV show, so I can see why they would want to change it. But here we're at. I'm so excited to see the rest of it. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video. Probably not, because it takes me 5 million years to record and then edit these. But oh my god, you guys, read the book, watch the show, and let me know. Let me know if you've read the book, if you've seen the show, what your thoughts are. I'll see you next time.